Welcome to the program today. My name is Mondo Gonzalez, and I am here with Lee Brainerd, who has written a tremendous book on 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. So this is a great time as you're watching this. Get your Bible out, because you can join us as we have this discussion, which I think will be a very fun discussion. The title of Lee's book is Apostasia in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. And we'll get to some of the background of what that looks like and what it even means. Why is it even relevant? Why should you even watch or care? But welcome, Lee.
Thank you, Mondo, for having me again. And I thank you, the whole Prophecy Watcher family. This is a tremendous blessing and a tremendous opportunity to investigate the things of God with reference to prophecy.
Yeah. So kind of for the audience, some of the audience that might not know your background, kind of tell them a little bit about yourself, where they can find your information.
Sure. I've been a prophecy student for 4 decades. I've put a lot of effort into the Greek and the Hebrew. You can find my material at soothkeep.info. That's SOOTHKEEP. That's Old English for Truth Fortress. And if you're interested also, I have a YouTube channel by Soothkeep.
So before we get in, this discussion, which we are having, we have lots of discussions in the prophecy world, and the first thing I want to say up front is that all of us, we want to be here as Christian brothers. We want to have the Holy Spirit in us in the sense of being gentle, and we want to be able to agree to disagree on topics that are not essential to salvation in a very loving and kind way. Jesus said, right, John 13:35, people will know that we're His disciples by our love for one another. So the conversation is one of peace and harmony, and so there are those within the prophecy camp that will disagree, and as we do, there's a lot of disagreements, but we know that God has called us to show grace and love. So as we talk about the differences, this is not meant in any way to be really condemning or sharp, but this is a loving conversation.
Right.
And I think that's super important, because so often, I know I get emails, unfortunately, Lee, from people who are relatively mean.
Yes.
I mean, they're throwing condemnations out. You're going to hell because, I didn't have a specific viewpoint on their understanding of the resurrection order. I'm like, really? So anyways, this is done in a spirit of really love and kindness. And so let's talk about that as we get into the discussion of the main point of your book. What is the debate? Let's keep it as simple as possible. What's the debate in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3?
Well, I'll just start with the King James Version, where we read that this day is not going to happen unless or except the falling away come first and the man of sin be revealed. So the debate comes down to the word falling away from the Authorized Version. Does this mean apostasy, or is this a mistake and we should be looking at this as a reference to the rapture, and it should be translated departure?
So you think about that what you have here, and this is good and important too, is that for those of you who have been watching Prophecy Watchers for a long time, we are 100% unashamed believing in the pre-trib rapture. We believe the rapture, the departure, the harpazo, the catching away of the saints is going to happen prior to the 7-year tribulation. And so the question comes is 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3, is this another evidence for the rapture as it relates to a departure? Or is it evidence of a falling away or an apostasy from the faith? So before the day of the Lord comes, is there going to be a rapture, which we know is true from a different passage, or is there going to be a falling away and an apostasy? And so that's really what it comes down to, is some people translate it as this departure, and they see it as a rapture passage. And so there are many great, again, Dr. Andy Woods, Dr. Thomas Ice, amongst others, that see this as a rapture passage. This is saying that before the day of the Lord, this is a pre-trib verse, pre-trib departure. You take a different position.
Yes, I do.
And so as we get into that, again, I would say that of all the theology that we have with, Dr. Andy Woods or Dr. Thomas Ice, there might be 0.1% that we disagree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, we're brothers in the Lord here. Let's talk about that in the sense of they take this position. Some of the reasoning throughout the years. Let's talk about their reasoning, because they're intelligent people, and they have reasons for why they would translate it as departure. Let's talk about some of those.
Well, it starts out with seeing in the English translations that you've got the word departure. And so, of course, that's going to bring to the mind, okay, what kind of departure is this talking about? Well, it raises the possibility that this is physical departure in the sense of the rapture. From there, their investigation would take them to other early versions, like the Latin versions, and they'd see discessio, which can be used for departure.
Yeah, physical departure.
They would look at the Little and Scott lexicon. They would see that the second reference is disappearance and departure. Okay, so this is still supporting this position, and it just kind of builds from there. And every other argument is really kind of focused around this lexicon argument and the English translation argument, and everything else is the development of that.
When we think about lexicon, a lexicon is just a fancy word for dictionary. I mean, and it's a little broader than that, but what I found was that there were several arguments. I mean, they have arguments from the English,
Yes.
they have arguments from the context or the grammar or even exegetical or theological arguments. One of the things that I found fascinating that you did in your book was you addressed, as you mentioned, this lexicon, this Greek dictionary had in one of the references for its meaning
Yes.
was a physical spatial departure. I got up and I left this spot and I walked over there. I departed from this area. And so many of the translations took this nuance
Yes.
and they put it in as a translation.
Yeah.
And they used the word departure for
Yes.
physical, okay? So talk a little bit about where this dictionary, Little and Scott lexicon, what's the true, let's talk about your research, 283 instances,
Yeah.
let's go through that for a minute.
Well, what's interesting when you look at the entry in the Little and Scott lexicon, and all you read is Olymp, period, meta, period, M-E-T-E. And then you see disappearance, departure. So people jump to conclusions that this is physical departure, spatial departure, a person going from point A to point B, going from the home to the market, going from home to the battlefield. It's legitimate to consider that as a possibility, but you want to go to the horse's mouth to get the information. So if you go back and you look up that entry, you discover that this is Olympiodorus, and it's his commentary on Aristotle's meteorology. So now all of a sudden, we're not looking at a historical work, we're looking at a scientific work, which starts in and of itself to raise some red flags. When you go and look at the passage and you translate it, you realize that this is not the disappearance of a human being or the departure of a human being from point A to point B. It's the evaporation of liquid from a solid when heat is applied.
When you're doing translation, you're looking at lexicons, you're going, hey, how is this word used? How is this Greek word used? And so you have options,
Yes.
right, to say, how do we get this into English? So what some of the people, they're taking this word from the Little and Scott that you found was 6th century AD.
That's right.
So they're taking a use of this word that is 500 plus, 600 years later than Paul's use, and they're bringing that back into the 1st century, Koine Greek,
Yes.
Common Greek, and they're saying, oh, this is what Paul meant. And that's very problematic, honestly. So in your research, 283 instances that
Yes.
you were looking, you kind of talk about the time frame of Paul's use and what you found.
I found 283 references, everything that's extant from 250 BC, first appearance, to 500 AD. Mm-hmm. When you categorize all these down, you find that nearly 90% of them are religious departure. And then there's another significant group that is political departure. And then there's scattered scientific uses, like medical terminology, which it's an abscess, because an abscess breaks out of your body.
Okay. And so those medical ones, what time frame are they later? Like the one we just referenced in Little and Scott was 600 AD.
The medical ones would have been the 200 to 300 AD.
Okay, so certainly late, a couple hundred years after Paul's writing.
Yep. And I would when I look at how the words are used, typically we have words in the New Testament that are used in common senses, and it's rare that we have one used that any medical or scientific technical sense is really going to be applicable, because the Koine of the New Testament is typically just the generic, everyday use of the words.
Okay. You know, one of the things that we think about this in the sense of why this is important is truth matters. You know, God chose specific words. We know that every word is divinely inspired. 2 Timothy 3:16.
Amen.
I mean, you know, that's important. And you wrote about this. You wrote a shortened version about this in a magazine, which some of you might have seen. And we're going to take a little break here to see how you can get the magazine, because again, stuff like this is tremendous. It's important. It's exciting. And people like Lee and others are contributing to the magazine and, again, trying to inform and educate God's people. So we'll be right back.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm Bob Ulrich, Gary Stearman's partner and the co-founder of Prophecy Watchers. I would love to tell you how you can become a subscriber to our wonderful prophecy magazine, creatively named The Prophecy Watcher. And ready for this? How you can get 8 powerful prophecy DVDs as a free bonus for subscribing today. Every day, the ancient prophecies of the Bible get more and more exciting as we watch world events come into perfect alignment with the words of the ancient prophets. Examine the pre-trib rapture doctrine taught by the Apostle Paul. Come to a deeper understanding of the giants of Genesis 6 and the real reason for the flood of Noah. Read the shocking things we see coming out of the world of science and technology, mind-blowing advances in transhumanism and artificial intelligence. Keep a close eye for a series of wars coming very soon to the Middle East. The Bible's a supernatural book, and we enjoy covering the fringe subjects and dark corners of Scripture as well. UFOs, the Nephilim, the miracles of the Bible, and so much more. It's a one-of-a-kind publication full of articles that will make you a Bible prophecy expert and prepare you for the future. We have a very special subscription offer for you today. For your gift of $50 or more to support the worldwide outreach of Prophecy Watchers, you can subscribe to either the digital version or the print version of our magazine. And here's the best part. In addition to receiving 12 monthly issues of the magazine, this offer comes with a fantastic bonus: 8 DVDs from some of the leading prophecy experts in the world today. 8 DVDs plus 12 issues of the magazine represents a $200 value, but it's available today for your gift of just $50 or more to support the work of Prophecy Watchers. This offer is available anywhere in the USA and will ship both the magazine and the DVDs absolutely free. Don't wait or hesitate. Call the toll-free number on your screen or visit our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv to take advantage of this limited time offer. Looking at the future through the lens of Bible prophecy is the entire focus of this ministry. We're motivated like never before by our desire to tell the world that Jesus is the only answer for these troubling times. And we do believe that He's coming back very soon, just as He promised. Partner with us today. Help us take God's message of salvation through Jesus Christ to the whole world.
So Lee, before the break for the magazine, we were talking a little bit about just the nature of the word itself and of the 283 instances that you document in here in the book, which I found most people are not going to read the appendices, but yet if you want it, what I appreciated was that you provided it.
Absolutely.
You provided it in Greek with the translation. People can look at it for themselves. You provide the source. That's super important. Let's talk as well. So we're talking about what Paul wrote, roughly 50s in the 50s AD. How does the church use the word apostasia?
Well, from the very earliest ages, all the earliest fathers, all the way up to the later fathers, 4th and 5th centuries, the only sense that they were using it in was the sense of spiritual departure or political departure, which we would translate spiritual departure as usually apostasy or falling away. And the political departure would be rebellion or dissension or something of that nature. That's the only senses they knew.
Now, let's be honest. I want that word apostasy in 2 Thessalonians 2:3 to refer to the rapture.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, we do. We want it to refer, because that would be such a great pre-trib passage.
Yes.
That, man, this would be like a slam dunk. It's over. See you later. Any other views? Here it is. But this is where we have to, again, be humble.
That's right.
I think of Isaiah 66, verse 2, where God is looking upon those who are contrite or humble and those that tremble at His word. I mean, we're not here to Again, we're not saying that others are forcing it, but in our convictions, we're looking at the evidence. You're 283 instances, and we go, hey, man, as much as I want it to be a physical departure, I have to submit to what the evidence is showing.
Yeah, when I first came across this position with a popular book that was given to me to read, I read it, and I couldn't say this couldn't possibly be true. I was a little nervous about it because there wasn't a massive pile of argumentation given, but it was possible. And so but the deeper I got into my investigation, the more I realized they had not looked at a big enough pile of evidence to frame the position. And really what it amounts to is you have just the mere assumption that it means apostasy. And then you get this pile of evidence that says, well, maybe it doesn't mean apostasy, maybe it means physical departure. Well, that's compared to no evidence at all. That's a pretty notable pile of evidence. But if you step back and you look at all the Greek evidence, all the Latin evidence, all the English and German evidence, it looks very, very different.
Let's talk about as well the friendly, and this is a friendly debate, it's a discussion, because again, we're all, no matter what, we're all looking for the truth of the word. One of the arguments that I've read for the physical departure is, well, hey, if you go back to the early English translations, it has the word departure there instead of the word apostasy or falling away. A lot of the modern translations, the King James was one of the first ones to vary itself from the idea of, it used the word falling away. Some of the now of ESV, others will say, they might even just transliterate it as apostasy. We have English, we know what an apostasy is. So the argument is well, hey, the King James was the first one to change the way that it was written. Before it was departure. So the early English translations, they understood it to be physical departure. Tell us the background on why that's not an accurate understanding. At first it sounds persuasive.
It does.
Okay, so tell us the background.
Yes, well, when you go back and you actually investigate all the early English versions and not the 6 or 7 or 8 that are going to be given in somebody's list, you discover a few interesting things. One of them is that for the textual evidence for the Wycliffe Bible, for instance, which you can examine by looking at the scholarly editions like Forshall and Madden of Wycliffe's Bible, you discover that many of the early manuscripts, in fact, most of them, had the word dissension and not the word departing, which is very interesting in and of itself. You also discovered that there was early testimony in other English documents for the translation of dissension. Well, then also now when we come to the later English versions, we discover that the King James was not the first Bible to feature falling away. It was in the 1568 Bishop's Bible. So that raises the question, where did the Bishop's Bible get falling away from? Well, the fact of the matter is, I think that the translation came from Martin Luther, who translated Abfälle.
In German.
Which is falling away. Martin Luther was a tremendous influence on all the early English translations and early English theology.
When you think about translation, and I mean, some people are interested, some are not. I know that I am in that regard. But the Wycliffe translation was not from the Greek, it's from the Latin.
That's right.
And so what you see is a transition from Wycliffe going very early from the Latin, and then later, really after the Reformation period, you have a lot of these early Bibles where they're kind of rediscovering the Greek. And so which of course Paul wrote it in Greek. And so there's no reason for it to go to Greek, to Latin, and then try to do it in English if we can go to the original Greek in that regard. So what I found amazing was talk about the background of these translations where even though they said departure in them, tell us about the notes that you documented here, which I thought was helpful.
Yes. If you go and look at these early English versions, and I was examining photolithographic copies of these versions. So this isn't something I picked up off secondhand with somebody else's research. Some of these I bought, some of them I found online. You look at the footnotes, you look at the marginal notes, you look at the introductions to chapters, and you look at the introductions to books, and you discover that though they use the word departure or departing in many translations, they tell you that they meant departing from the faith. And they use terms like apostasy and falling away as direct synonyms.
This is what's interesting. So there are those that will say, well, again, this all changed with the King James Version, but if you looked at them, they meant this. And you go, well, I understand that that's possible.
Yes.
How do you get into the mind of a translator? You get in the mind of a translator by looking at their notes.
That's right.
And so by you, and this wasn't just one version, right?
No, we in my book here, we're going to bring out, or I bring out instances from the different years of the different Bibles. We see the Bishop's Bible. We're going to see the Geneva Bible. Mm-hmm. We see the Coverdale Bible, the Matthews Bible. We see a lot of versions of the Bible that preceded the King James Bible with their notes and footnotes and marginal notes.
Yeah, and this is what's awesome about Lee's book, and so much so that I wrote the foreword for it, but because I was like, this is tremendous, and Lee has taken the research and he's gone to extensively to be thorough. There have been other, again, John Feinberg and others that have done research, and there's been some master's theses that have been written on this, but certainly none of them have gone as far as you do. And so we're going to take a little break here where you can see how you can get, again, Lee's tremendous research.
The rapture of the church is a hotly debated subject in Christian circles these days. The same passages that we believe teach the pre-tribulation rapture are viewed differently by others. Revelation 3:10 tells us that we can escape the tribulation and the wrath of God that comes upon the whole world. This verse should be enough to justify the pre-trib rapture. But as you've heard today, there's another controversy that has sprung up recently. There are teachings that the word apostasia should actually be translated as depart or departure instead of a falling away or spiritual apostasy, indicating that this passage proves the rapture. Enter Lee Brainerd, a tremendous Bible teacher and researcher who has convinced us beyond the shadow of a doubt that the word apostasia is indicative of a spiritual falling away or departure. Lee went back in time to investigate the origins of the apostasia translation in 2 Thessalonians 2:3, and what he uncovered may surprise you. Will the church see the Antichrist? Will the rapture happen before the tribulation? Lee's outstanding book will clear up the confusion. Apostasia, Rapture or Apostasy, is available from our ministry for your gift of $25 or more by calling the toll-free number on your screen or visiting our online bookstore at prophecywatchers.tv. Shipping is included anywhere in the USA. For those of you interested in learning more about the biblical doctrine of the rapture, we've put together some key materials that will help you understand this important teaching. The Apostasia package includes Lee's new Apostasia book, Gary Stearman's hour-long DVD, The Rapture is a Resurrection, and encouraging author Jeff Kinley's new book, Uncovering the Secrets of Bible Prophecy. Both books and the Rapture DVD are available for your gift of $50 with free shipping anywhere in the USA. Other than salvation, is there any subject in the Bible more important than anticipating the Lord's soon return? We hope you'll support the work we're doing here. Nothing would make us happier than seeing our friends all over the world join us when we hear the sound of the trumpet and Jesus calls us home. With that said, we'll see you here, there, or in the air.
Well, I really hope that you look into this because one of the things that I appreciate so much about Lee's book is really the methodology. Interpreting Scripture is one of the most important things that a Christian can do. God intends us to interpret His Word carefully, right? Study to show yourself an approved worker, 2 Timothy 2:15. Rightly dividing the Word of truth. So we don't want to be haphazard. And so one of the ways that we do that is we don't just go look at a lexicon, grab a nuance or definition of the word that is 500 years later,
yep,
and then force it back on the text. So what Lee's book does is I don't know if you intended this, but the way that I looked at it was, wow, if you follow your methodology, it brings us to a safer understanding of a proper interpretation because You're looking at the evidence. You're not being
Yep.
casual.
That's right. Well, every message I preach that's a doctrinal message, and every book I write that's a doctrinal book or takes up a doctrinal subject, that methodology of how we interpret the Bible and how we interpret evidence is always my underlying principle.
Let's talk about, if you can, summarize for us in a minute the grammatical, the theological, even the contextual. I know that's hard. I'm sorry. In just a moment, we're not just looking at definition of words, but there's a context here. Kind of
Well,
talk about
it's true. I mean, people point out context is everything. Well, context is everything. I mean, even in real estate, context is everything. I one time built a home that was worth $210,000. If it had been a mile away on a lake, it would have been worth $1 million. Context is everything. But when we come to this passage here, some people say the context is the rapture, and I think this is a big mistake. The last 2/3 of the prior chapter, chapter 1, the context is the day of the Lord in the aspect of the second coming of Christ. And most of chapter 2, the context is the day of the Lord in the aspect of the events of the 70th week, particularly the Antichrist.
Yeah.
And so the reference to the rapture there is not the broader context. That's an immediate context to tell the church, you are not going to be here for the day of the Lord.
I think that's really important too, because there's no doubt the idea of Paul writes that are gathering together in verse 1. And then in verse 2, he says, that the day of the Lord has come. And then in verse 3, he begins to focus on what the day of the Lord would look like. And the day of the Lord, even going to 1 Thessalonians, the day of the Lord is coming upon those, that are unsuspecting in peace and safety. They're going to sudden destruction. So you have this idea that the day of the Lord cannot arrive until... Now, granted, we believe until the rapture happens, here we have something specific about a departure or an apostasy of some kind that is connected with the man of sin being revealed and the mystery of lawlessness and some other things. But, as we wrap it up here, why would an average Christian spend the time to read the book? Give some encouragement. Why would it matter to them?
Well, there's going to be two things they're going to get out of it. The first thing is they're going to get actually, I think, a good solid understanding of this verse and its fit in the broader context. And the second thing they're going to get is just an example of how to do deep and broad research on a subject and not do a superficial investigation.
Well, Lee, appreciate your time. We've got some other things that we're going to be working on, but I hope you've appreciated today's program because, again, it is important to get into the deep details of God's Word and also to be encouraged. I mean, we appreciate your prayers, your support. Make sure that if you're watching this by television, you can find more of the content that we're doing. We do one program a week for television, but we're doing many things online. You can find us at YouTube, at Rumble. Certainly go to our website, prophecywatchers.com. You can get our app. So we are excited for what God is doing here, and it can only be done, again, through your prayers and support. So we appreciate all that you do for us, and appreciate you watching today. We will see you next time.
Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.